In this video, what I want the focus to be on is globalization. Now, globalization is something that will come up time and time again across both Theme 4 and Theme 3. It's a huge part of A2 economics. Now, globalization is, well, it's basically about integration. Of the global economies. So all that basically means is that, well, it's based on the old cheesy cliche that the world is getting smaller. Economies are far more interlinked than they used to be. They trade far more with each other than they used to. We have increased flows of resources between economies. So that could be linked to labour. So for example, the UK has lots of migrant people coming into the UK. That is the product of globalisation. We've got more and more trade blocs across the world where economies are basically agreeing to promote free trade with each other. Okay, so examples could be NAFTA, which is Canada, Mexico and the USA agreeing on free trade with each other. You've got free trade across the European Union. So trade blocs is a big leader to globalisation as well. Now, other keywords that people associate with globalisation could be things like MNCs. And linked to that, we've got FDI. Now, all an MNC is, it's an organisation or a business, basically, that operates on a global scale. They produce in more than one economy. Okay, so a great example would be an organisation like McDonald's. They're an American company, but they've got stores based across the world, and there's probably a good chance that a chunk of their revenues and profits don't actually occur in America anymore. MNCs grow or move overseas, if you like, for lots of different reasons. This could be due to cheaper production available elsewhere. It could be slack human rights or environmental laws in some economies they can exploit, or it could simply be to expand into overseas markets and sell more products. Now, linked to this, we have FDI, which is basically foreign direct investment. And all this basically is, it's about economies investing into each other's economies. So at the time of producing this video, the Chinese and the French have agreed to build nuclear power stations in the UK economy. And they're going to spend £18 billion on these things. Okay, now globalisation then, why has it increased massively? Well, let's think about why it's grown. What I would say is one big driver of globalisation has been by the World Trade Organization, the WTO. The WTO have focused over the last 70, 80 years or so on lowering trade barriers between economies, trying to promote economies to basically do more trade with each other, integrate more, connect more with different economies across the world. It's been a big driver of growth and has forced economies across the world to cooperate and work closer together. Other drivers linked to this one really is something called market liberalisation. And all this really is about different economies across the world becoming more open. So shedding away them protectionist policies and realising the benefits of trade and globalisation and basically looking to embrace it more. Other ones, we need some kind of technological breakthrough for this to happen. And this has been in two different areas, communications and in transport. So think about the communications one first of all. If you want the global economy to integrate, then different economies need to be able to communicate with each other quickly and cheaply. So we've had a big surge in infrastructure, technology which has meant that people can communicate across the world, not just cheaper, but a lot quicker as well. It allows MNCs more people to grow abroad, different leaders in different economies to talk on a more regular basis. And then transport. The cost of transport has fallen massively, which allows more people to travel across the world, see different places, work in different places. But the main benefit here has been the cost of goods. Okay, now we've already looked at the theories of absolute and comparative advantage. What I would say is that trade would have increased a lot more than it has done hundreds of years ago if it had been cheaper to move things from A to B. Boats have got bigger. We've got what we call containerization, which allows boats to carry bigger quantities of goods and services. They're easy to load up onto boats, unload from boats, move around the countries. So the cost of shipping has made it more cost effective to produce in different economies across the world. So overall, you've got there the main reasons why I've had this big surge in growth in globalisation. Now, let's now think about, is globalisation any good or not? Benefits of it. What I would say is specialisation has got to be one big benefit of globalisation. As different economies specialise in the production of a narrower range of goods and services, then basically economies can access a bigger quantity of goods and services. They focus production on what they're best at, and then buy things from other economies that they're not very good at producing. It leads to a growth in global output. We've also got a big surge in competition between businesses. Okay, so firms now aren't just competing with firms in their own domestic market, they're competing with different businesses across the world. That means they've got to find more cost-effective ways to produce. They've got to design and innovate and create better products, for example. And what this should all do is to force down prices whilst also giving consumers a much bigger choice in goods and services. Another big benefit has been labour movements. Okay, whether this is a good thing or bad thing it's a bit of a debate. But for an economy like the UK, because of globalisation, we've been able to bring in migrant workers to fill skill gaps. To bring people in areas where we're lacking, for example, or to bring in cheap migrant workers from abroad, which has held back on the cost of production again, and should in theory lead to cheaper production. What we've also got in terms of a benefit as well is ideas and technology. Economies don't just trade in goods, they trade in ideas and technology. The spread of ideas across the world has created lots of great potential economic growth. And for some economies, we've also got to view FDI as a major source, as a benefit. Poor economies that lack the funds available in their own economy to invest, to expand and grow, well, these can now come from abroad, whether it's offered by multinational corporations or as loans from different economies across the world. It's a source of money which can be used to grow an economy. And normally with that FDI, you'll get the jobs, but also the ideas and the technology, which can really drive an economy forward. So, let's stick with those being the main benefits. Let's now think about the drawbacks of globalisation. One big problem is increased vulnerability to external shocks. What this does, it creates an inability to manage your own economy. Because the global economy is so interconnected and globalised now, problems in one economy can very quickly spread to another economy. So, for example, the most recent recession, the financial crisis, began in America, but it had massive repercussions for economies across the European Union. So it can create a big, big problem. You've also got what some people call the race to the bottom argument. Okay, multinational corporations are very good at playing governments off against each other. And basically saying to different governments, well, come to your economy if you can offer lower corporation tax rates than another economy, for example. So what you find is governments constantly slashing corporation tax rates to try to get the big firms to come to their economy. It can create a real big problem. With this one as well, you've also got economies that race to the bottom in terms of health and safety and human rights and environmental protection, all trying to lower their standards to make it cheaper to produce in their economy, to attract big firms to come to their economy. A lot of people have said linked to this one, you've got impacts on labour markets. Because of global competition, firms now are trying to cut their costs as much as possible. This can lead to workers receiving far better deals. It weakens the power of trade unions. It can create a big problem. Other problems, you've got trade imbalances. The UK economy, for example, has got a huge trade deficit. Big problem in the production of goods, and it's creating things like deindustrialisation in parts of the country, lots of nasty structural unemployment. What it basically means is there's more money flowing out in trade than there is coming back into the economy. A lot of people say another big problem is the homogenous nature of production. Because things are now produced on a global scale, it's killing local cultures and local goods and services. It means that often, wherever you go in the world, markets are dominated by global brands. So it kills off the unique identity of smaller or different economies across the world. A link to that, then, you've got this domination of global brands. Okay, but we did talk about this competition, but what tends to happen is that domestic monopolies, so a market might be dominated by one firm, is suddenly competing with big firms from across the world. Quite often these big firms from across the world will buy out the smaller ones in different economies, and you end up with huge multinational corporations just creating global monopolies, which of course is terrible. It stifles competition, it stops small firms from setting up, for example. So it can be really bad for sort of global identity and competition again. So overall, what you've got there, you've got a huge list of benefits and drawbacks of globalisation. Whether you think it's good or bad or not will really depend on who you are. Unemployed miners, unemployed steel workers would say it's terrible. It's cost them their job. But if you work in the financial centre of London, which relies on trade, foreign investment, for example, you would argue it's a wonderful thing. As a consumer, generally you would say it's good. Cheaper prices, competition, more choice, more innovation. So overall, it's for you to decide whether you think globalisation is a good or a bad thing or not.